Plans will also be rehearsed to move people from what is called danger zones to safe zones. Civilians will also receive hands-on training in providing basic first aid, handling firefighting equipment, and taking shelter during emergencies. Now, this is the first such exercise that India has seen since the 1971 war. That is when India and Pakistan went to war and Bangladesh was created. It is significant because it signals a heightened security posture to the enemy. It also tests preparedness of civilian agencies as well as the coordination between civil agencies as well as the defense forces. It fosters, as a result, interagency collaboration. Designed to educate civilians on how to respond to emergencies, emergency preparedness methods also showcase India's prowess. It enhances India's resilience in the face of attack by the enemy. It also boosts public confidence in national security and preparedness for this kind of an eventuality. Now, remember, we want to underline this, that this is just a mock drill. It is not a reason to worry. It is not any indication that India is going to go into a full-fledged war with Pakistan. But this is something that you need to know. If you're a citizen of this country and if you want to know what should you do if an air raid siren goes off or if a blackout test siren goes off, this is what you should do. Number one, remember to stay informed. Follow all official government and military announcements. Rely on verified news sources like CNN News 18 to avoid misinformation at a tense time such as this. Number two, stay calm and avoid any kind of panic. Keep your emotions in check to prevent any kind of chaos from ensuing. Trust in the National Defense Mechanism and the National Defense Authorities. Follow safety protocols. Know the location of the nearest bomb shelter or the nearest safe zone right outside your office or your home. Participate in the safety drills and follow the evacuation instructions that have been issued by the authorities. Also, prepare an emergency kit. Include water in it. Drinking water is absolutely important. Any kind of non-perishable packaged food. Carry flashlights, batteries, phone banks, and medicines. And of course, don't forget to carry a little bit of cash and whatever your ID cards are. Also, keep essential documents in a waterproof folder. Limit any kind of travel or movement. Try and stay indoors as much as possible unless it's necessary. Obey the curfew orders and the restrictions that have been put in place by the authorities. Conserve your resources. Use fuel efficiently. Use electricity and water responsibly. Avoid hoarding any essentials to ensure fair distribution. Excuse me. Also, support the national efforts. If you are able-bodied, if you are within the 18 to 35 age group, then volunteer and go ahead and donate blood and also volunteer for any kind of relief work. Respect and assist the law enforcement agencies and the emergency personnel. Stay connected with your family and neighbors. Create a communication plan and check in regularly, particularly with elderly, with children, or if you have vulnerable individuals in your close circle. Also, report any suspicious activity. Inform the authorities of anything that you find unusual. Avoid spreading any kind of rumors or unverified information. And of course, finally, maintain morale and maintain unity. So across 244 districts tomorrow on the 7th of May, these civil defense mock drills will be conducted. It'll be about how to respond to air raid sirens, how to respond to crash blackout drills, and so on and so forth. So the question that's doing the rounds, everyone out there watching this broadcast on social media, everybody wants to know, how should you prepare if war were to break out between India and Pakistan? Joining us is somebody who's been there and done that. This is the first time that we've issued a circular of civil defense since 1971 war. Kiran Bedi, who's former DG of Civil Defense, she now joins us, former Delhi Police Commissioner, former Lieutenant Governor. Thank you very much, ma'am, for speaking with us. So make sense of this in common sort of layman terms, responding to air raid sirens, responding to crash blackout drills. What should people do in response to these civil defense drills? What is the SOP?
Understand it. Understand the challenge and understand the value of togetherness. Understand how you have to protect your own self and protect the other. I think it's bringing the youth, the energy and love for the country and also collaboration together. I think it's instilling a spirit of not insecurity, but shared security. I think that's how I look at it.
Like I said, introducing this topic is that this is the first time we are having this kind of a mock drill since the 1971 war. Even during Kargil, we did not have this kind of a mock drill. So there's a whole generation out there who does not know this. If you could recall for our viewers how it was in war times in the past.
I'm a resident of Amritsar, Zakka, and the 1965 war, I was a young student, a school-going child. And I remember what we were trained was that if there's a siren and saber jets used to cross over our territory, the rule was not that you stop going to school and you stop your movement, but get into a trench. So we had trenches all along the roads where the moment we had a siren, we would get into a trench. And of course, all our windows, all our glasses were all darkened. There was no light at all we would keep the indoor light off. And also because we don't want any signal for upfront. Now technology has changed, things have changed a lot. But this was the time, at that time in 1965 war, and I was a border resident. I used to go cycle, volunteer in a hospital as a student, and also get into a trench when there would be a saber jet flying over our heads.
But tell me, ma'am, in this day and age, obviously a lot has changed between 65, 71 and the day and age that we're living in. What should one do, particularly people if they're living in high-rise apartment buildings? Should they switch off the lights? Should they, switch off the gas, so on and so forth?
Yes, of course. I think the guidance which is now coming, it must be taken seriously. Everybody should know what to do when. So you never know what idea strikes back and comes to your help. But the main thing is helping yourself and helping your next door, your neighbor, your family, your person on the street. I think it's being alert and also being of help. And it's not no more a selfish living. It's community living. It's collaborative living and supporting the police. You see, let the police do its job. And what the armed forces, the Army, Navy, and Air Force do its job on the borders, we take care of internal security as citizens by being alert, knowing what to do, not to panic, and help each other, and also get trained. That's what rehearsals are meant for, is to be oriented for training, how to keep those staircases clear, have the net so that if somebody has to take a jump down, you catch the person on the net. These are all trains of civil defense. So that's what rehearsals are meant for, is orientation. But it's also along with disaster management. During my time in 65, there was nothing called disaster management. Yeah. Now you have disaster management and expertise, even police and other paramilitaries all over. So we are much better organized, better equipped, and better supported. So why should every citizen not get aligned with the sense of security?
I was reading some time back, you should pack a go-to bag which has, your essentials, some basic food, water, power bank, so on and so forth. Because we are so dependent on technology and this is modern day living, should we have this suitcase somewhere, packed and kept that we can wish away in case, some kind of a war situation arises between India and Pakistan?
Go where? You go where? Go where with the bag? The sky is common now with the kind of warfare now, the kind of missiles and the kind of nuclear warfare threats. Now it's common. It's disaster. It's either prevention or it's disaster. So what our government of India is trying to do, and the world over, is prevent a disaster. You see, we've had a disaster, but to prevent a larger disaster, preparedness is the best prevention. So preparation is the best prevention, but then if it happens, we take it as it comes, but we need to minimize the damage. So we have to now be equipped to know what to do. We should not be found ignorant, but no escape. No packing your bags and go where? Go where? I think everything will follow you. So best is stay put and then feel secure and be out to help each other.
I was curious to know your thoughts. The two recent wars that we've seen where we can draw examples of, in Israel, of course, they have a culture of bomb shelters and things like that. In Ukraine, apparently, the first place that people sought refuge in was metro stations. Are these things that we should be thinking of?
You never know. Let's see whether it accelerates, whether it increases. You never know. But this is the primary prevention which we are at. So we are at phase 1. So phase 1 is Citizens prepared to look after yourself and to the others, and be united. Be united and be eyes and ears of your government. Eyes and ears of your government. And if you watch anything around, ask for help, but be of help. Ask for help, but be of help and be alert. And if you watch around anything else, alert the government, and the government must immediately respond. It's a time to be of eternal vigilance. I think this is phase one. From eternal vigilance, if things don't settle down, then we go to the next levels. I think we would, if we do, but I hope we don't. But this prevention, the national prevention, coming together of the youth energy, I think is the call of the day.
You know, you talked about community protection or community security, as it were. You know, the last time we had an extraordinary situation was, of course, and that we lived through in recent times, was during COVID. And there it was the opposite. You know, it was the opposite of community. Just self-isolate, you know, do not mingle with outside people. You know, if you're in a family, then stay in that family or that flat. This is the opposite of that. At a situation such as this, at a time such as this, you don't want to be staying alone. You want to be staying with other people in a community. I mean, it's a complete 360 sort of change of mindset.
Then segregation, social distancing was a solution. In fact, we were helping each other by social distancing. And that's why all of technology was used from work from home and talk from home and connect from home and do FaceTime. That was the solution. But today it is synergy. It was separation. It was isolation. Now it's coming together of energy. Now synergy is the answer. Coming together of minds. But one common cause, protection of the motherland. Protection of the motherland and isolation of the enemy.
I want to ask you one final question. In your long years and experience as a cop, why is India not able to break this cycle of terrorism followed by some punitive action, then again terrorism followed by some more punitive action?
It's a very complex question. It's historical. It's rooted in history. It's very, very complicated. And I do not know whether the international muscle and the mindset and the value systems has a solution. But it's a very complex, it's inherited. By the way, it's an inherited wound India is living with post-independence. It's an inherited wound which was preventable. I think had Sardar Patel lived longer, we may not have had the wound. I don't know. This is my personal view.
Okay. Kiran Bedi, as always, a pleasure speaking with you, ma'am. Thank you very much for joining us and helping our viewers understand and make sense of these civil defense mock drills, which will be undertaken across the country on the 7th of May tomorrow. Meanwhile, amid these heightened India-Pakistan tensions following the Pahalgam attack that killed 26 people, the United Nations Security Council held a closed-door consultation last night. Multiple UNSC members questioned Pakistan's role and the rhetoric that it's used after Pahalgam. Meanwhile, India has secured backing from all 5 permanent UNSC members, bar China, of course. A move that, of course, will be seen as isolating Pakistan further. Economically, Pakistan faces the heat as India continues to push global lenders like the IMF, the World Bank, even the FATF, the meeting that's going to happen next month in June. India is pushing all of these agencies to cut aid to Pakistan. It's accusing Islamabad of misusing these funds to funnel it into terrorism. Now, this session of the United Nations Security Council, it happened for about 90 minutes. 15 members of the council, 5 of them permanent, 10 of them non-permanent members. They rejected this whole narrative that's been put forth by Pakistan that this was a false flag operation. This is something that Pakistan has been repeatedly saying since the 22nd of April, since Pahalgam happened. They instead asked for accountability in the wake of this deadly attack. Questions were also asked about the possible involvement of terror groups like the Lashkar-e-Taiba, the Jaish-e-Mohammed. Concerns were also voiced over tourists being targeted for their religious identity. There were also concerns raised by member states on Pakistan's escalating nuclear rhetoric. Even someone like a Khwaja Asif, who's their defense minister even today, raising the nuclear saber, as it were. Also, the recent missile tests that they've tested, the Abdali 450-kilometer range missile test that happened on Saturday, and yesterday there was a 120-kilometer short-range missile that was tested, all of which the members feel is contributing to regional instability. The session concluded without any resolution, no statement, no press release, effectively isolating Pakistan. And after the consultations, its representative at the UN came out and went into a long rant. But several members also reiterated that bilateral issues with India should be addressed through bilateral means and not at multilateral fora like the UNSC.
While Pakistan does not seek confrontation, we are fully prepared to defend our sovereignty and territorial integrity. We categorically rejected India's attempt to implicate Pakistan in the terrorist attack of 22nd April, an attack which has been condemned by Pakistan and all members of the Council. We raised alarm over India's unilateral suspension of the Indus Water Treaty, a legally binding accord brokered by the World Bank and upheld during wars. Any attempt to disrupt their flow constitutes aggression.
So remember, India is not currently a member, a non-permanent member of the UNSC. Pakistan is. So it was a diplomatic challenge for India, but it played a key role in isolating Pakistan at the UNSC. Last week, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah gloated about how Islamabad had pushed the UNSC to water down the language in the US proposed statement after Pahalgam, which originally named the terror group, the Resistance Front, TRF, which had claimed responsibility initially for the attack and then later it withdrew that. India quietly took the non-permanent members into confidence. In fact, External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar briefed representatives of 9 out of 10 non-permanent nations about India's position on the attack. Pakistan pushed for an emergency closed-door meeting of the forum to try and drum up support for its narrative. But what they forgot was that Prime Minister Modi had already spoken to 4 out of 5 permanent members. And like I said, the Foreign Minister had spoken to 9 out of 10 non-permanent members, briefing them about Pakistan's hostilities. Pakistan once again used a global forum to try and internationalize the Kashmir issue, but it failed to do so miserably. The UNSC has asked Pakistan to resolve the issue bilaterally with India. This after India had conveyed to the members of the forum that India's resolve to bring the perpetrators, planners and backers of the Pahalgam terror attack to justice is second to none. But Pakistan continues to saber rattle with each passing day. The rhetoric that we're hearing, particularly when it comes to like nuclear war and nuclear attacks, etc., is just going through the roof. Pakistan's Defence Minister Khwaja Asif has issued another threat to India and resorted to warmongering. Khwaja Asif said that if India dared to attack Pakistan, no one would survive. He likened the situation to what's been happening with the Israeli military offensive in Gaza. Earlier, Asif warned that New Delhi could launch a military strike at any moment along the line of control, but that turned out to be a false alarm.
पे अगर किसी इस किस्म की वो मेंटालिटी अगर मोदी ने अप्लाई करने की कोशिश की जो गज़ा में अप्लाई हो रही है या जो नेतन्याहू अप्लाई कर रहा है या जो नेतन्याहू के जो अलाइज हैं वो अप्लाई कर रहे हैं उनको उसको मदद कर रहे हैं उसको मुसल्लह कर रहे हैं तो यहाँ पे आगे पाकिस्तान जो है वो उस तरह का जवाब देगा कि तारीख़ याद रखेगी कि किसी कौम ने आगे से जवाब दिया था तारीख़ याद रखेगी
सर इंडिया पाकिस्तान
हम अगर हमारी एग्जिस्टेंस खतरे में पड़ी हमारे खिलाफ इस किस्म का कदम उठाया गया कि पाकिस्तान को जो है खुदा न खास्ता जो है हमारी जो एग्जिस्टेंस है वो खतरे में हुई तो फिर जो है अगर हम नहीं तो कोई भी नहीं है फिर सीधी सीधी बात है.
All right, I'll come to the saber rattling by the Pakistani Defence Minister Khwaja Asif in a second, but I want to talk about what happened at the UNSC and how Pakistan is trying to sort of internationalize the Kashmir issue again. Manjeev Singh Puri is a former diplomat. He's joining us. He'll also be joined in a bit by Mike Baker, who's a former CIA officer. Mr. Puri, thank you very much. First of all, it was a closed-door session, so no resolution was passed, no public comments were made, except, of course, the Pakistani permanent representative went on a rant. I'm just curious to know this whole attempt, this whole narrative by Pakistan to make this whole Pahalgam issue not about terrorism or counter-terrorism, but because of the unresolved Kashmir dispute. Is that finding any takers anymore?
Zakka, thank you very much for inviting me. Look, Pakistan has an old playbook, and that playbook is always to try and internationalize the entire issue. The fact that the world is kind of wary, they don't even agree to it, is obvious by the reactions of almost all heads of state, government, foreign ministries, etc. from around the world. And so what is Pakistan doing? They are trying to detract from this being a terrorist attack, which merits a response and a suitable and appropriate hard response at Pakistan, which is the instigator of this whole thing, to try and broad base the thing and talk about all kinds of things. Their ministers talking about existentialist threat and so on and so forth, while they are the guys who are posing these kinds of threats, talking in terms of nuclear action and so on and so forth. What would have happened in this closed door session, and this is very normal at the United Nations, what you see is the famous horseshoe table, which is a public place. But there is another small little horseshoe table on one side where members meet in confidence and they discuss things and nothing really comes out of that. But I have no doubt that they would have asked them whether LET had taken part. This has been a report also which has been put out by others. Pakistanis would have tried to, say that, the Indians are threatening us, etc. and so on. But the reality is most countries jolly well know what the state of play is. And of course, while they would call for de-escalation, as you would expect anywhere in an international setting, people want to talk about de-escalation. They don't want to, even if somebody is at fault, they don't want an escalation of violence and war, etc. And this being the fact, and Pakistan being a member of the Security Council, there's a certain amount that does play by having the person sitting next to you.
Yeah.
However, India's position is well known. We've reached out to members of the Security Council, the prominent members of the world. Everybody knows the particular fact. And so what Pakistan has been able to get is an opportunity for their diplomats to be able to stand up in a podium, say what they want. But the whole world knows the reality. The world, of course,
one other thing I'm curious about is, on the one hand, Pakistan says, oh, let's de-escalate. Even the UN Secretary General yesterday said military solution is no solution, etc. Everybody's saying de-escalate. Then what explains the stuff that, Khwaja Asif, their defense minister, is saying? I mean, he's really ratcheting up the saber when it comes to all this nuclear talk. I mean, why? I mean, their information minister last week went up in a midnight press conference and said he has credible information that India will attack in the next 24 to 36 hours. None of that alarmist stuff has come true. Why are they ringing the alarm bells then?
They are reaching out to their own public. They are, in a sense, covering up for the fact what they did, which is self-evident even to people in Pakistan. But what they are trying to say is that what India is trying to do has an existentialist issue, and we as a country are prepared. Remember, in Pakistan, it's the army that calls the shots. These politicians, act on the basis of what they are told, and what they are doing is they are sort of rattling up the people in Pakistan so that they also understand that, that they try and take them away from saying, oh God, we shouldn't have done this, into we are being threatened, there's an existentialist threat against us, etc. This is all playing to a public domain, a kind of thing which is an old playbook in Pakistan, this time using the nuclear weapons, which is certainly not a dumb thing, and something that they should be particularly cautious.
All right, Ambassador Manjeev Singh Puri, as always, a pleasure speaking with you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on CNN News 18. Thank you. So India and the United Kingdom have clinched a free trade agreement that represents the most significant post-Brexit pact that's been signed by the UK. Prime Minister Narendra Modi shared a post on social media. He called it a historic milestone. He in fact had a phone conversation with Prime Minister of Britain, Keir Starmer. He said that both India and the UK have successfully concluded an ambitious and mutually beneficial free trade agreement along with a double contribution convention. Now, these landmark agreements will further deepen India's comprehensive strategic partnership with Britain, also catalyze trade, investment, growth, job creation and innovation in both economies. The FTA comes in the backdrop of growing economic ties between India and the UK, as was exemplified by the bilateral trade of about $60 billion in 2024, which both countries are projecting to double by 2030. So India is really hoping for greater access for its students, for its professionals, for long-term visas in the UK market. Also a social security agreement so that individuals who are Indian citizens residing in the UK don't have to pay in both places. Also, market access for several goods at zero customs duty. On the other hand, the UK wants a significant cut in import duties on goods like Scotch whisky, electric vehicles, lamb and meat, chocolates, even certain confectionery items. Britain's also looking for more opportunities for UK services in India, like in telecommunications, legal and financial services, including in banking and in insurance. So let me go across to Sanjay Suri, who's got more details on this. A couple of things, Sanjay. First things first, our viewers would like to know, what British goods are going to be cheaper in India and vice versa, what Indian goods are going to be cheaper in Britain.
Well, the first is easier to figure out, Zakka. Certainly the first thing that comes to mind is Scotch whisky, and ever since this campaign was accelerated by Boris Johnson, that's the one thing he stressed on, that was stressed by British negotiators very early through these extensive talks, and agreement on that was reached early. That was one of the first items agreed, so we can expect more Scotch whisky to flow into India at a cheaper price. Also then automobiles, and there is going to be a difficulty in importing whole complete automobiles, finished products into the Indian market, because the Indian auto industry will need to be protected to a considerable extent, but there will be some leeway granted more than at present. These are by way of the more high profile products, but then this could extend very much more into services, legal services, financial services, and these are all areas where the British government has been looking for greater access, and so we can expect a lot of movement there. There will also be an attempt, and this has been an attempt rather, to open the market for British pharmaceutical companies at reduced tariffs, and that will also, the flip side of that is that the difficulties that will arise for the Indian pharma manufacturers, particularly with generic drugs, and a lot of British companies are resistant to that. A lot of this devil will be in the detail. This whole negotiation has been all about detail, so that will really spell out exactly who gets more of what at what price.
I also want to ask you, I mean, from India's point of view, one big contentious area was always about immigration, you know, a lot better visa terms for Indian students, Indian professionals, tech professionals, etc. Do we have any sense of how those questions have been addressed?
Formally speaking, we have been told repeatedly that that is a matter outside of the free trade agreement. So if we speak of the strict negotiations within trade and on this product, that tariff, then the migration issue sits outside of that. But the fact is that while formally it may sit outside of that, those negotiations have been related to a trade agreement, and India finds that it needs more movement for its professionals on better terms, longer stay, more productive stay. There are better terms that India has been looking for, and those are related to the trade agreement. That has been a matter that has been negotiated in parallel and not without linkages. So again, we have to see how much ground the British give on that, because immigration is a very, very sensitive issue here. But then if there is an agreement, both sides have had to give way necessarily from the earlier hard-held positions. This has been the great British promise since Brexit, and we're going back to 2016.
Yeah.
We were told that trade with the EU will collapse, but India, there'll be an agreement. With the US, there'll be an agreement. With the US, it was a non-starter. With India, finally we have it, and we don't have it without a word of thanks, at least transatlantically, to Donald Trump in the White House. His squeeze on trade has encouraged others to trade more with one another. Without doubt, that has accelerated this in the last stages.
Certainly did. We'll also have to wait and see if this now spurs an Indo-US bilateral trade agreement. Of course, there is hope that one will be clinched before Trump travels to India in the fall for the Quad Summit. For the moment, thank you very much, Sanjay, for joining us and putting that issue into perspective for our viewers. Thank you. So the Indo-UK FTA would become the first FTA that India has signed with a Western country, with a G7 member, could possibly pave the way now for an Indo-US bilateral trade agreement, and also possibly India-Europe bilateral trade agreement. Lord Karan Bilmoria is member of the House of Lords. Thank you very much, Lord Bilmoria, for speaking with us. First things first, you know, this has been going on for the last 3 years. I remember when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister and he come to India, I think in April of 2022, he said, you know, we've given a 6-month deadline to our teams. We've got to wrap it up by Diwali. Unfortunately, you know, Prime Minister Johnson didn't last till Diwali, and then you had multiple Prime Ministers after that. And now you have Prime Minister Starmer and Prime Minister Modi who've clinched this. Do you reckon, as Sanjay was saying a moment ago, that the Trump factor sort of expedited these talks?
These negotiations started when I was president of the Confederation of British Industry, the CBI, in the UK in early 2022, over 3 years ago. And here we are over 3 years later, and I'm now chair of the International Chamber of Commerce, the ICC UK, and we've concluded this deal. I am absolutely over the moon. This has been a really difficult deal with 14 rounds of negotiations, and it's big news because this is the biggest deal that the UK has signed since Brexit. India is the fastest growing major economy in the world. India has overtaken the UK to the fifth largest economy in the world, and I believe now India is the fourth largest economy in the world and the fastest growing major economy. And yet, India only is the 11th largest trading partner of the UK. It should be one of the 5 largest trading partners of the UK. And I believe that this free trade agreement will turbocharge trade, business, and investment both ways between our countries from £42 billion a year now to over £80 billion within 5 years. This is great news.
I think the target that that the two prime ministers have also laid out, I think, is to double trade by the end of the decade. But I do want to ask you, for a long time, what was holding up this deal was concerns that India had about, student visas and tech professionals getting, long-term visas to live and work in the UK. Have that been included as part of this, or have they kept that out of the FTA?
That is completely separate. And by the way, the 2-year post-graduation work visa is something I personally led in Parliament going back to 2000, 2008 and 7-8. It was taken away, was brought back in, and it's a big attraction to foreign students, including to Indian students. And I hope that remains going forward. On the other hand, Indian workers are the number one on the points-based system coming into the UK every single year. What has been unfair is that they pay national insurance, but if they come back to India, they don't get that back. This free trade deal is addressing that by saying both ways, if British people work in India, Indians work in the UK, for the first 3 years, they don't have to pay that national insurance. And so that they're not putting money in that they're not getting back. When it comes to migration on the whole, of course, it's an important issue, but we've got to look at facilitation of goods and services and investment both ways. This free trade deal unlocks a lot of that. Look at tariffs. Scotch whiskey going down from 150% to 75% and down to 40% in a decade. Cars from 100% down to 10%. Tariffs been reduced on almost 90% of items from India's point of view. This is great news because India is booming and it's a big market for British businesses. On the other hand, Indian companies are investing in a big way in the UK as well. And I think deals like this are a great way of unlocking potential between the countries to the benefit of businesses, benefit the economy, benefit of both countries.
All right, Lord Karan Bilmoria, thank you very much for joining us, and congratulations on the India-UK FTA, which both sides have now clinched. So let's move on to the ongoing sort of concern around India and Pakistan and whether or not there will be some kind of kinetic action. So far, the biggest non-kinetic diplomatic strike that India has made against Pakistan in the aftermath of the Pahalgam attack is the decision to put the Indus Water Treaty in abeyance. India has restricted water flow from the Baghlihar and the Salal dams. It's cut the supply of Chenab water to Pakistan at the start of the Kharif season. In fact, with full control over the infrastructure in the Indus Basin, India has decided that it has the means to strike Pakistan where it perhaps hurts it the most, and that is the agricultural belt, the food basket that is Punjab. It is using water now as an instrument to raise the costs on Pakistan. So India's decision, for example, to keep the Indus Water Treaty in abeyance has caused alarm bells in Pakistan. The Indus Water River System Authority, an advisory committee belonging to that authority, has expressed deep concern over the sudden decrease of water in the river Chenab and the inflows that are coming in to the Marala Dam because of this short supply by India. The authority predicts that it could result in a 21% water shortage in Pakistan during the early Kharif season. Remember, in the last monsoon season, Pakistan saw a drought of up to 40% deficient rainfall. Now, the late Kharif season, the shortages are expected to be around 7%. Now, this is the wheat crop. And then in the next season, they will be sowing paddy, which is going to happen in a few weeks' time from now, where the requirement for water, obviously for paddy, is much more than it is for wheat. And that is when this suspension or the abeyance of the IWT can be devastating for Pakistani farmers. Now, the government has granted permission to put in place the transmission system for providing connectivity to the Chenab Valley power projects, and that is limited for its 1,000 megawatt Pahalgam hydroelectric project. The notification has been issued. This is going to be fast-track this project. The Pahalgam is the most significant project as it's India's first storage dam on the western rivers that flow into Pakistan. In fact, the IWT explicitly stops you or bars you from constructing dams which have the ability to store water. Any project has to be a run-of-the-river project. This will also be India's highest dam. It is expected to be ready next year. When constructed, it will be about 145 meters, if I'm not mistaken, in height. It's going to produce about 3,300 million units of energy per year. Pakistan had objected to the construction of the dam, claiming it's a violation of the Indus Water Treaty. But now that the treaty itself is in abeyance, the question is, then India is now expediting work on all these various power projects that had been held up. I also want to go across to Mr. Mike Baker. He's a former CIA official. Mr. Baker, thank you very much for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. You know, India and Pakistan are standing at a bit of a precipice, if I may, in the aftermath of the terror attack that happened 2 weeks ago. India's contention is that, you know, civilians have been targeted. They have been indiscriminately killed, many of whom have been asked singularly for their religion and then shot because they happen to be non-Muslim. For the national mood here in India right now is for some kind of precipitative action, for some kind of military punishment that will make Pakistan realize that it's not business as usual. What may that be? And do you agree with this supposition that India needs to do something that will raise the cost for Pakistan?
Well, I think, and by the way, thank you for having me. Look, I think that you've already pointed out the sort of the key step or reaction that India could take, and that is freezing the Indus Water Treaty. Look, the Pakistani officials, I think, were caught on the back foot completely by surprise when that happened. You've had conflicts before where that treaty did not come into play. And Pakistani officials have referred to it now. By that I mean putting it on abeyance, the treaty. They've referred to it as economic warfare. And in response, just recently, over the past 48 hours, they've test fired a surface-to-surface ballistic missile, clearly as sort of a signal that they view the reaction that India has had so far to the tragedy in Kashmir as almost, as you said, on the precipice of warfare.
But Mr. Baker, again, I come back to that thing. What can India do? There have been repeated terror attacks in India over the last 30, 40 years, right? 26/11, right. Uri, and then Pulwama, and now we have this that happened in South Kashmir in Pahalgam. And India's response has always been that it takes some form of precipitative action, but then the pattern continues. It's terror attack, punitive action, terror attack, punitive action. I think the question that everybody here in India has is, how do you break that cycle?
Well, I think we have a number of case studies around the world that indicate, and this is a very unsatisfactory answer, that maybe there isn't a real way to break that cycle. I mean, just look at what's been happening in the Middle East for generations, right? So perhaps there isn't necessarily a way, and maybe approaching it from that perspective, how do we end this permanently, isn't the route to take, right? I do think, again, look, going back to this discussion of the treaty, because I think that was such a definitive step. Pakistan, 25% of their economy depends on agriculture. So I suspect, look, and this is getting, oftentimes, as you know, right, oftentimes conflict in this region does not get the attention from the rest of the world. This is getting that attention at this stage of the game. And every time it's referred to in international media, you always see the same type of phrasing, the two nuclear-armed neighbors, or the two nuclear-armed countries, whatever. So the rest of the world is very concerned about the potential for this to escalate further.
All right, Mr. Mike Baker, former CIA official, thank you very much for joining us. We'll be in touch with you as and when these developments further progress over the next few weeks. When India and Pakistan clash, there is always a third player watching closely from the sidelines: China. While the world sees a two-nation conflict, the real game has been triangular, and for a long time now. From military support to strategic cover, Beijing has consistently backed Islamabad, sometimes quietly, sometimes overtly. This is the story of the India-China-Pakistan triangle and why the next war may not be fought on one front alone. It could be the nightmare scenario for which Indian military strategists have been planning for decades, a two-front war with China and with Pakistan. During the 1965 India-Pakistan War, as Indian troops pushed back Pakistani forces in Kashmir, China issued aggressive warnings to India over the border disputes in Sikkim and in the northeast. Remember, just 3 years before that, China had won in the India-China War of 1962. So though China did not enter the 1965 war directly, Beijing's posture forced India to divert some resources to the Eastern Front. Effectively, what China managed to do was to get India to open up a two-front pressure scenario. This was more psychological warfare than actual warfare, but it ultimately worked to Pakistan's advantage. Despite that, the Indian army wreaked a catastrophic defeat on Pakistani forces. Eventually, it led to the Tashkent Agreement. In 1971, as India intervened to stop the genocide in East Pakistan and helped create Bangladesh, Pakistan counted on China's help. But in 71, geopolitics intervened. The United States and China were engaged in secret diplomacy at that time. Just a year after that, it was Richard Nixon who went to China for the very first time a US president visited Beijing. At that time, US President Richard Nixon had asked Chairman Mao Zedong of China to mobilize troops to threaten India on the northern front. Beijing did move some units to the northern border, but again, it did not intervene directly. It signaled support, but it stopped short of war. Instead, what happened was, it was the Russian Navy that sent a huge posé of ships which directly helped in the Indian naval blockade of Karachi, and that helped the Indian army, the Indian troops who stormed into Bangladesh and stormed into Dhaka to capture that country and dismember East and West Pakistan in a matter of less than 2 weeks. But the psychological leverage that China brought to bear was real, and it shaped India's military planning for decades to come. In 1999, the next war that India and Pakistan fought during the Kargil conflict, China took a more cautious approach. Publicly, it called for restraint from both sides, India and Pakistan, and privately, there were multiple conversations with the Pakistani leadership at that time by the Chinese leadership, asking them to pull back these Pakistani regulars as well as these terrorists who had infiltrated the icy heights of Kargil. At that time, India-China relations were slowly but surely showing signs of thaw. Beijing did not support, either directly or indirectly, Pakistan's intrusion into Indian territory. It also understood this could escalate dangerously. But at the same time, China never condemned Pakistan by name. Sometimes in diplomacy, silence can also send a strong message. In 2019, after the Pulwama terror attack killed 40 Indian soldiers, India struck back with an airstrike on a terrorist camp in Balakot in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. The world watched as the two nuclear-armed neighbors stood at the very edge of war. At the United Nations, India pushed for the global recognition of Masood Azhar, who's the Jaish-e-Mohammed chief, whose organization was behind the Pulwama attack. But China repeatedly blocked that move. It shielded Masood Azhar at the United Nations Security Council multiple times, calling for more evidence to show his linkages to what happened in Pulwama. Only after sustained pressure from both the United States and France did China finally relent, and Masood Azhar was blacklisted by the UN Sanctions Committee 1267. It showed how deeply Beijing shields the strategic assets of the Pakistan army. Today, China is deeply embedded in Pakistan through the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is part of the wider Belt and Road Initiative. More than $50 billion China has spent in investments in highways, some of which have been built on disputed territories. There are joint military exercises between the Chinese Navy and the Pakistani Navy, and the Chinese and Pakistani armies. All of this have locked both countries into a tight embrace. For China, Pakistan is simply a counterweight to India. For Pakistan, China is the ultimate insurance policy. It's not just about their all-weather friendship. This is actually a geopolitical axis. And that's not all. China has today equipped Pakistan with a range of advanced weaponry, including the JF-17 Thunder, which is a 4.5 generation fighter jet, the J-10C fighter jets, which is a 4th generation fighter, the HQ-9 air defense systems, similar to the S-400, which India has procured from Russia, the Babar-class frigates, the Hangor-class submarines, and the Al-Khalid T-4 tank. So basically, according to SIPRI, one of the renowned and well-respected military research institutes, about 60% of all Pakistani weaponry today is Chinese. These systems form the core of Pakistan's military strength. In any future conflict with India, and particularly so these days because war rhetoric is really sky high, the drums of war have been beating both in Pakistan as well as India after the Pahalgam attack, these Chinese-supplied weapons platforms will likely be deployed across air, land and sea. It reinforces the depth of the China-Pakistan ironclad strategic partnership. So if India and Pakistan were to go to war, then China may not jump in with its troops, may not directly intervene in the war, but it is not going to be a neutral party either. It could activate tensions along the line of actual control to divide Indian forces, and this is an even sharper reality today after the 2020 Galwan clashes and the mobilization of Indian and Chinese troops along multiple friction points at the LAC. It all began on the 18th of May 1974. India shocked the world by conducting its first nuclear test, codenamed Smiling Buddha. It happened in the Pokhran desert of Rajasthan. Though it was termed as a peaceful nuclear explosion, the message was loud and clear. India had joined the nuclear club. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi hailed it as a scientific triumph, but to its neighbors and to the rest of the world, this marked a turning point. The balance of power in South Asia had shifted. In the process, it also lit the fuse of a dangerous arms race in South Asia. Nearly 25 years later, in 1998, India stunned the world once again. Under Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, India tested 5 nuclear devices in the same desert in Pokhran, declaring itself as a nuclear weapons state. After a long moratorium, India conducted the series of these 5 nuclear tests. It was known as Pokhran 2 or Operation Shakti. These tests included both fission and fusion devices with yields up to 45 kilotons. India had then become the 6th nuclear weapons state in the world. India had crossed the Rubicon. The 1998 tests shocked the world, particularly the United States, which had failed to detect India's preparations. The US imposed economic and military sanctions on India under the Arms Export Control Act, including cutting off assistance, banning defense exports, and opposing international loans by the IMF and the World Bank. The US President at that time, Bill Clinton, imposed an ostracization of India which took years and multiple rounds of dialogue between Strobe Talbot and Jaswant Singh to be eventually lifted. And it was not just the US. At that time, Canada, Japan, and several European countries followed America's lead. They halted aid to India, they suspended bilateral cooperation. The global powers feared that there would be a new arms race in a volatile region that was South Asia. For the very first time in years, South Asia was under the nuclear spotlight. But it didn't stop there. Just 2 weeks later, this happened. On the 28th of May 1998, just 17 days after India's tests, Pakistan conducted its own nuclear tests in the Chagai Hills of Balochistan. The tests were again 5 in number, exactly the same as India's, were Pakistan's answer to India's show of strength. The move was widely celebrated in Pakistan, people took to the streets, the government declared a national holiday. Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif called it a necessary act of self-defense. He also said that the score with India was settled. Pakistan was now the 7th nuclear weapons state in the world. But Pakistan's nuclear success came with a dark underbelly. In 2004, the world learned that A.Q. Khan, the father of Pakistan's nuclear program, had secretly sold nuclear technology and designs to countries like North Korea, Iran, and Libya. Under intense international pressure, President Pervez Musharraf placed AQ Khan under house arrest. There was even a dramatized television confession where Khan admitted that he sold nuclear secrets to rogue states. Yet he was widely revered at home as a national hero, but around the world, AQ Khan was seen as the man who created the world's most dangerous nuclear black market. He died under house arrest in shame and stigma. India has long maintained a no first use or NFU nuclear doctrine, meaning that it would only use nuclear weapons in retaliation to a nuclear attack, that India would never attack with a nuke first. This policy is rooted in India's strategic culture of restraint. It also aims to present India as a responsible nuclear power. Pakistan, on the other hand, rejects the idea of no first use. It maintains an intentionally ambiguous stand. It reserves the right to use nuclear weapons first, more so because it feels overwhelmed by India's conventional military superiority. And responding to this, many in India have also been calling for a rethink on the no first use policy. Estimates suggest that India possesses around 160 nuclear warheads, while Pakistan may have slightly more, around 170. But numbers are not the full story. Beyond the numbers lies strategy. India has achieved what is called a nuclear triad, which means it can deliver a nuclear weapon by land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles. It can also deliver it from aircraft like the Sukhois and the Rafales, and also nuclear-powered submarines. Now, what this does is it ensures that India has a credible second strike capability. India can hit by land, air, or sea. India, through the INS Arihant, now has the capability of submarine-launched ballistic missiles, or SLBMs. Pakistan, on the other hand, lacks a fully operational naval-based deterrent, making its nuclear strategy that much more vulnerable and that much more prone to risk. Pakistan can only deliver a nuclear warhead by inter-land ballistic missiles. But that is not the biggest risk for Pakistan. One of the most alarming developments has been Pakistan's focus on developing and the potential use of tactical nuclear weapons. Now, these are small battlefield warheads which are designed to deter or to repel conventional forces. These
Mahi sir.
As a tool. So let's try and understand this. Ashok Motwani ji is with us. Ashok ji, if you can explain, and then we'll try and put it out here on the plasma. So I'm just going to stay on this floor if we can, and with this image if we can. Ashok ji, how critical is this?
It was kind of expected. My book was published in year 2020, and we have been talking about it, and the government has also taken a lot of initiative, but now it has come in limelight. There are many measures which have been taken in last few days, and they were only on the destruction of financial position of India, unnecessarily putting hassles into the projects which were there. Some projects are delayed because of their terrorism, some projects are delayed because of the legal issues. We have patiently come over all the loopholes, and now even the dredging matter which has been discussed about the ruler, about the Chenab, water, that is also, I was with one of the experts this afternoon, and he said that, sir, we have been working on it right from 2013 onwards. So they are all set now that the legal treaty is in abeyance. Legal hassles will be resolved. I mean, we can go ahead with our own things, and there are special sections under which the challenges are going to be resolved. It is going to be very difficult for Pakistan for mischief they have done in delaying our projects and inflicting financial cost which runs into tens of thousands of crores.
Right.
Now, let us see how things unfold. They will have certainly their systems not in place, and there will be a lot of damage to them unless they behave themselves.
Right. I've opened this map here. Info in data is the source for this map, and what we'll try and do is try and zoom in a little and see if we can explain this to you. What's happening now? This is Baglihar with a 0.2 MAF, that is a million acre feet of water, 0.32. That's not much water because this is a run of the river project. This is where Baglihar is right now. Now, what's going to happen today? 5 out of 5 projects which are still pending, 4 have been green lighted. Which are those 4 projects? Let's try and understand this. First is the Pahalgam. Pahalgam is right upriver of Baglihar. Pahalgam and Rathal, both of these have now been green lighted. So we are going upriver on the Chenab. So run of the river, the flow of the water will be controlled here. And Pahalgam is a 1000 megawatt project. So that's a huge water storage project that's now been green lighted. It had been stuck for some time. This could be operational. Pahalgam could be operational by 2026. That's what we are given to understand, that Pahalgam could be operational by 2026. Then which are the other ones? Bursar, Kiru and Kirthai. Kirthai 1. So Bursar, Kiru, Kirthai 1 and 2. Now these are again further upriver in this region. So it's all on the Chenab, and that to the upper Chenab where these projects are now going to be activated. We also have Kishan Ganga here, which they are going to complete at a faster pace, and this will hold water at the Jhelum. So these are, and then can we activate some of the canal systems, and in the long term try and move this water downriver towards connecting it to the Ravi, the Byas, and further down into Bharatiya region. So that's why you have regions like Punjab, Haryana, Delhi, all which could benefit if this flow of water is dammed here first, stopped here, and then redirected further down via canal systems. There are some older canal systems also which could further irrigate this region of Jammu and Kashmir. So this is critical. Dr. Ranganathan, perhaps the biggest game or tool that we are using?
Good evening, Anand, and good evening to my fellow panelists. A couple of points out here. First of all, just to briefly mention about the subject of mock drills. I'm afraid out here, as far as mock drills is concerned, I think Pakistan is one up on India, however hard we might try, because for years they are professionals in conducting these drills, because as it is, it's not that they're conducting drills, there is acute electricity shortage, power cutoffs, water traps run dry, there is food shortage, and people are running scared of bomb blasts. So every day is a mock drill for them. So in the event of actual war, Pakistanis will be better prepared. But now coming back to the Indus Water Treaty.
Viewers, after the blood-soaked carnage of Pahalgam, Pakistan has done what it always does when exposed, rattle its nuclear saber. But this time, the blackmail rings hollow. Under the relentless pressure of Modi's uncompromising stance, Islamabad finds itself gasping. Its economy is in free fall. Allies are deserting. The Baloch and Pashtuns don't want to fight what they say is not their war. Its military is fighting a crisis of credibility. Nuclear rhetoric is all it has left. A dire threat from a state running out of options. Listen in, viewers, as Khwaja Asif, Pakistan's defense minister, says, if India dares to attack Pakistan and our existence comes under threat, nobody will survive in this world. If this were to happen to us, then Pakistan will respond. Everyone will remember the day. If our existence is in danger, then either we survive or no one does, unquote. Listen in, viewers, to these responses. Hanif Abbasi is the other one, another deranged Pakistani minister. But listen.
पे अगर किसी इस किस्म की वो मेंटालिटी अगर मोदी ने अप्लाई करने की कोशिश की जो गज़ा में अप्लाई हो रही है या जो नेतन्याहू अप्लाई कर रहा है या जो नेतन्याहू के जो अलाइज हैं वो अप्लाई कर रहे हैं, उनको उसको मदद कर रहे हैं, उसको मुसल्लह कर रहे हैं, तो यहाँ पे आगे पाकिस्तान जो है वो उस तरह का जवाब देगा कि तारीख़ याद रखेगी कि किसी कौम ने आगे से जवाब दिया था। तारीख़ याद रखेगी।
सर, इंडिया पाकिस्तान
हम अगर हमारी एग्जिस्टेंस खतरे में पड़ी, हमारे खिलाफ इस किस्म का कदम उठाया गया कि पाकिस्तान को जो है खुदा न खास्ता जो है हमारी जो एग्जिस्टेंस है वो खतरे में हुई, तो फिर जो है अगर हम नहीं तो कोई भी नहीं है। फिर सीधी बात है।
ये जो गोरी, शहीन, गजनवी, ये चौकों में सजाने के लिए नहीं हमने रखे हुए, ये हमने हिंदुस्तान के लिए रखे हैं बाबा। ये जो 130 एटॉमिक हमारे पास वेपन है, वो हमने सिर्फ मॉडल बनाने के लिए नहीं रखे हुए, और आपको पता ही नहीं कि हमने पाकिस्तान के किस किस हिस्से में रखे हुए हैं। ये दुनिया भी जानती है, आप भी जानते हैं।
Viewers, Pakistan is perhaps the only country in the world that has named